Welcome to Writer Reader. My name's Eleni. I've always said that in the States, we need to have some holidays after the winter holidays, after the New Year, basically between that period of depressing cold time and spring. Here in Greece, we have something kind of like that, similar to the Mardi Gras season, I guess, in New Orleans, but it's called the carnival season, or apokrias, which means abstaining from meat. There's feasts, there's fasting, there's parties, there's masquerades where people dress up kind of like Halloween. It's very festive. Today I'm excited to talk about Joyce Carol Oates. I've read many of her books, and I'm going to speak about one of her early books that she wrote, A Garden of Earthly Delights. I read this book a couple of years ago, and she was only 25 when she published it in 1967. She revised the book in 2003, and I read that version. The book mirrors the time and place roughly that Oates grew up in. It takes place during the Great Depression. This is the first book in what's known as the Wonderland Quartet series. I've read the whole quartet, and I liked 3 out of 4 of them, including this one. It describes the life of the protagonist, Clara, through her experiences with 4 men. So her father, a lover, a husband, and a son, and her struggle for independence. The larger themes are around social class and poverty in America. So about Joyce Carol Oates. She's 85 and still active, still very much writing and teaching. She grew up in a working class farming town in western New York, and her own life was impacted by the hardships and also violence characterized in much of her fiction. She cites Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland as a major influence on her writing. She says, "This was the great treasure of my childhood and the most profound literary influence of my life." She began writing pretty early at age 14 when she received a present from her grandmother, a typewriter. She has been nominated several times for the Pulitzer Prize. One question Oates gets a lot is, why does she write depicting so much violence? And it's true. I read her books and I'm thinking, my God, I would not have, I guess, the courage or maybe the appetite to write in this kind of a way. And I struggle with that because I think violence is a very real part of our existence, but I also think we have so much of it. There's probably somewhere in the middle that could be reached. In fact, her response that I'm taking this from is an actual entire article that she wrote. Why is your writing so violent? Since it is commonly understood that serious writers, as distinct from entertainers or propagandists, take for their natural subject the complexity of the world, its evils as well as its goods, it is always an insulting question, and it's always sexist. The serious writer, after all, bears witness. Her books also deal with the struggle of autonomy, and so you see a lot of characters really trying to achieve what their dreams are, even if they might be misguided. And so that's not too unlike our own struggles and dreams that we try to achieve. And of her obsession with writing, I find this interesting. She says, "I'm more of an observer. I'm not sure if I have a personality." This brings to light, must you subsume yourself? Must your own sense of self be subsumed to this creation that you are making? Do you need to truly give yourself away in order to create this book and these characters to inhabit them? Perhaps you do, and perhaps that's what I struggle with. Reading through some of her interviews, this theme has come up again and again about her disappearing, and that'll come up a little more later too. So when you look up prolific, you will see Joyce Carol Oates staring at you in the dictionary because she's written over 100 books, and maybe her writing habits will tell us a little bit about how she accomplishes this feat. So let's see. Unlike my subject last week, this author is all over the internets, so it was really difficult to narrow this down. I'm going to try. Oates has kept roughly the same routine that she had when she was 25. She works for about 5 hours in the morning, and then in the afternoon, if she's not teaching a class, she bikes or runs or takes a long walk. There's a country road near her house, and when she jogs up the hill, ideas are waiting for her, she said. She usually returns to work until about 8:30 p.m. when she has dinner, often while watching a movie. I'm lucky to get in a few hours in the morning, and obviously I'm doing things like this and music as well. So I admire that she's that dedicated, and I think it says something about her ability to produce this much work. I would describe her writing as raw. She uncovers and is not afraid to stare at the more sinister side of our species. She says she never confronts a blank page. Often that's what we complain about as writers. You open up, to write something and it's, oh my gosh, it's blank. There's nothing. What am I going to say? So basically she says that she gets her ideas while she's out walking or running or meditating, and then she's able to bring those ideas to the page. She's never written with a blank page. She says writing prematurely is a mistake. It's better to think for a long time. My problem is I wouldn't know how long that would be because I'm thinking about my book all the time, but I still need to write. Somebody asked her about word count and she said, how many words she does per day. And she said, I have no idea. Why would anyone count words? I love that. On developing characters, she gives her students an assignment basically to take some characters and have them talk to each other. And students will usually say, well, I don't know them. And she says, simply listen. And that can be hard because, you're listening to the ether, basically. But somehow it works. She says in the first 5 minutes of this exercise, of course, you feel like you have nothing. But if you stick with it for 2 hours, you will begin to see something take shape. And the problem is a lot of new authors don't stick with it. And I think that's the problem in many fields. You have to actually keep going. When she starts a new book, she says the first 6 weeks are like hell, but a seasoned veteran will keep going because she knows that something's going to develop out of this hell. She says the great enemy of writing is being interrupted by other people. I would add that being interrupted by your own head is also not helpful for me to check the news, to check messages, things like that. So I try to set rules for myself or timers where I don't check those things for a certain amount of time, but it does not always work and I find my brain kind of wandering. She's changed the way she writes in this sense. She said in her younger years, she would write the entire draft and then start revising it, whereas now she'll revise kind of paragraph by paragraph, and she wishes that she were like her young self more, but her personality has changed. In terms of the nuts and bolts, she takes notes a lot when she travels, and then she brings those home and transcribes those to her laptop, creates an outline, and she said that she always knows the ending of her books before she writes the book, and so the rest of the time is spent trying to figure out how she's going to get to that ending. Another habit that I do not resonate with as somebody who likes snacks is she finds eating boring. Oh my gosh, I love eating. I mean, who doesn't? Well, Joyce Carol Oates. So she does not actually eat until around 1 p.m. and then she'll only have, maybe an apple and some cottage cheese. Of that, it kind of goes back to our other theme about the self. She wrote this in her journal. I catch myself thinking, I will starve you into submission, she wrote, not to punish the body or to become unnaturally thin, but simply to exert one's will. Overcoming her body is a way of controlling her mind, perhaps.
But I don't advise that.
Writing advice. Writing is a consequence of reading, and writing well is a consequence of reading well. The title of this book was inspired by a Dutch painter, and the painting was called The Garden of Earthly Delights. And it depicts 3 scenes from left to right. On the far left is kind of like a Garden of Eden scene. The middle scene is where you see your people engaging in earthly pleasures and delights. And the last scene is hell, presumably where these people go because of this. But no one knows exactly what this painter had in mind. So there's been different interpretations. Is it a condemnation of pleasure and earthly delights, or is it a celebration? So I think this Garden of Earthly Delights would really pair well with this food. I'm just going to do a little freeze of this tofu, just basic tofu. You can get this kind, there's a Japanese style, and then there is a barbecue and a basil style that you get. But the wild garlic is delicious for fried. I love books that depict different versions of America because there's so many versions of the United States of America, obviously. And depending on who you are as a person, your class, your race, your gender, there's where you grew up, when you grew up, there's just so many different Americas. So this particular America, as I said, is during the Great Depression, and it depicts people that are stuck in poverty and farming, people that provide our food. So I love that about the book. Also, her books are just page turners. You just keep reading on. I feel really invested in the characters and what they want. Also to the point where I'm cringing when they're making decisions that I know are not going to go well. So what do you think about these themes of self, of subsuming the self in order to write? Are you able to do that? Is that something possible for you? What about violence in writing? Do you struggle with that? I think the protagonist, Clara, could really use this. After reading Milan Kundera last week, and his point about seeking the truth instead of trying to say the truth, that focused me a little bit on trying to look at the roots of some of these topics that I'm talking about. And so I was researching the role and view of animals in ancient times, and then also our eating habits prehistorically. So I hope to integrate some of this knowledge into the story itself. How about you? How's your book going? Share what you might be struggling with below and what resonated with you. Look forward to seeing you next week.